Traveling through time to 1960, I became the village bum everyone despised, even the dogs. The moment I opened my eyes, there was a girl lying on my con crying, saying she'd traded her body to me for half a gene of meat. I searched the whole house and found nothing left but one stale corn bun. The girl went crazy. Her sister-in-law and 4-year-old niece were still starving, waiting for her to bring the meat back to save their lives. Right in front of her, I ate the corn bun. I had transmigrated into the village bum of Kaoshan Village in 1960. My brain felt like it had been churned through with countless shards of broken glass, and the pain made my scalp tingle. Scattered memories flooded in. The Great Famine, a shabby mud brick house, never knowing where the next meal would come from. And Chin Feng, the bum everyone hated, was me. Before I could process this damn identity, a woman's voice, thick with tears, came from beside my ear. Please, be gentle. I lowered my head and saw a girl lying on the earth in Kong, her eyes tightly shut, biting her lower lip, her face smeared with tears. Li Xiaomei, the village beauty, 20 years old, had been tricked by the original owner into getting onto the Kong for half a gene of meat. But there wasn't even a trace of grease in the room, so where would any meat come from? The original owner had gotten it for free. I searched the room all around. The stove was empty, and the rice jar was cleaner than a face. In the end, I felt around in the corner and found a corn bun, still warm, though it smelled a little sour. Wrapped in a quilt, Li Xiaomei shrank into the corner of the Kong, her voice trembling. Chin Feng, where's the half gene of meat? No meat. I laid it out plainly. She froze for 2 seconds, then lowered her head to look at the glaring plum blossom stain on the Kong. Big tears came crashing down. You lied to me? I lied, and what's done is done. I couldn't be bothered to coax her. Her sister-in-law was about to starve to death, and her 4-year-old niece was so hungry she couldn't even walk. But I was about to starve to death too. With one corn bun, how were 4 people supposed to split it? There was no way to split it. Right in front of her, I stuffed the corn bun into my mouth and swallowed it in a few bites. Li Xiaomei completely lost her mind, rolling off the Kong and lunging at me barefoot. Give it to me. Even half is fine. Please. I grabbed her wrist with one hand, like picking up a chicken. She struggled a few times, but her strength instantly gave out, and she collapsed onto the ground, crying until her voice was hoarse and cracked. Just then, someone started pounding on the door. Xiaomei, are you in there? Open the door. It was a woman's hoarse shout with a sob in it, along with a child's faint cry. Auntie? Auntie. Li Xiaomei's face instantly turned deathly pale. In a panic, she reached for the quilt, trying to cover the traces on the Kong. She looked at me in terror. Chin Feng, don't open the door. Please, don't let her come in. I ignored her, walked to the door, and yanked the bolt open. A cold wind mixed with flurries rushed in. Standing at the door was a sallow, emaciated woman, holding a little girl of about 4 in her arms, her head drooping like a frostbitten eggplant. Lulan, Li Xiaomei's sister-in-law. Chin Feng, where's Xiaomei? She stood on tiptoe and peered inside. She came to your place for meat, and it's been over 2 hours. There's no meat. I stood in the doorway. Not even an ounce. Lulan froze. Then where is she? In the house. She still tried to squeeze her way in, when Li Xiaomei's panicked voice came from inside. Sister-in-law, don't come in. Lulan's steps halted abruptly. She had lived in this village for over 20 years. And the moment she heard that voice, she understood everything. That kind of shame, like being stripped naked and thrown onto the street, couldn't be hidden. Chin Feng. Her throat seemed blocked by something. What did you do to Xiaomei? I lowered my head to look at her and told the truth. I had my way with her. Lulan's eyelids trembled violently a few times, and her body tilted as she collapsed to the ground. The little girl in her arms was flung out, rolling once into the snow. I grabbed Lulan's arm and kept her from hitting the doorframe. She had completely passed out, her eyes shut, lips trembling, her face drained of all color. Her body had been starving for who knew how many days, held up by sheer will alone. Once that last breath of strength gave out, she was done for on the spot. The little girl on the ground lay face down in the snow, not even crying. Her lips moved, squeezing out a voice thinner than a mosquito's buzz. Mom. Li Xiaomei staggered out of the room and shoved me aside, clutching Lulan as she cried out, Sister-in-law, sister-in-law, wake up. She looked up and roared at me, her eyes full of red veins. It's all your fault. Why did you say it? Why did you tell her? I ignored her and bent down to pick up the little girl. A 4-year-old child, so light she was like a little figure made of sorghum stalks. Even holding her in my hands felt like she might fall apart. The little girl instinctively burrowed into my arms, still murmuring auntie under her breath. I picked Lulan up from the ground around the waist, turned, and carried her into the room, laying her on the Kong. A bit of warmth still lingered on the heated brick bed, and her brows knit slightly as she let out a muffled groan. "Don't touch my sister-in-law." Li Xuemei chased in, thinking I was about to do something beastly. Give it a rest, who'd care? I added a few sticks of firewood to the stove, and the room finally had a bit of warmth again. One unconscious on the Kong, one curled up beside her crying, and one half-starved in my arms. 3 women, each more miserable than the last. Honestly, I really didn't want to bother with them. Damn it, they were all burdens. But with what happened to Li Xuemei, I really did get her for free, so I ought to shoulder some responsibility. As for her sister-in-law and little niece, if they're of no use later, they have to go. If you don't want to die, stay here. I patted the dust off my hands. I'm going out for a bit to get food. Li Xuemei froze, wiping her tears. Lulan had also woken up and struggled to get up, still cursing. You beast. You tricked my sister-in-law, you won't die a good death. Enough. Save your strength to stay alive. I tossed out those words and pushed the door open to leave. The wind at more than 30 below scraped across my face, painfully cold. But my mind was unusually clear. Right now I'm flat broke. If I want to stay alive, I have to get back what others owe me. Half a month ago, the Li brothers borrowed half a gene of meat from the original owner. And up to now, they haven't paid back so much as a hair of it. The original owner was a coward, one scare from people, and he wouldn't even dare let out a peep. I don't put up with that. I walked straight to Li Dahuai's courtyard and kicked the door open. The main room was nice and warm. Li Dahuai sat cross-legged on the Kong smoking his pipe. His wife Wang Ho-hot was mending clothes beside him. The eldest son Li Jizai was squatting on the floor adding firewood, and the younger son Li Jiming was dozing against the wall. A family of 4, holing up for the winter. The door was kicked open, and a gust of cold wind whooshed in, blowing the ashes from the brazier everywhere. Who is it? Close the door, close the door. Wang Ho-hot shouted at the top of her voice. I didn't close the door. I stood in the doorway and swept my gaze over the family. Li Dahuai. Li Dahuai lifted his eyelids and glanced at me, the pipe stem still in his mouth, his tone neither warm nor cold. Yo, Fengzi? What brings you here? I stepped into the room and shut the door behind me, getting straight to the point. Your eldest and second sons borrowed half a gene of meat from me. You're paying it back today. The room fell silent for 2 seconds. Li Dahuai's pipe paused at his mouth, and Wang Ho-hot's needlework also stopped. Li Jizai looked up at me, then lowered his head again. Li Jiming, on the other hand, opened his eyes and sized me up sideways. What meat? Li Dahuai pulled the pipe from his mouth and tapped off the ash. Who borrowed meat from you? How come I don't know about it? If you don't know, ask your 2 sons. I stared at Li Jizai. Jizai, you say it yourself. Li Jizai squatted on the ground without moving, his eyes darting toward his father. Fengzi, did you remember it wrong? When did I ever borrow meat from you? I smiled. That kind of smile right before things turn violent. Fine, you don't remember. I took 2 steps forward to the edge of the Kong and turned my head to see an earthenware basin beside it with a bowl upside down on top. I reached out and lifted it. Under the bowl were 2 cornmeal pancakes, golden yellow and still steaming. Oh, your family still has pancakes to eat, huh? My voice rose at the end. Hey, what are you doing? Wang Ho-hot sprang up from the Kong and tried to snatch them back. I swung my arm across, and she couldn't get close at all. She cried out anxiously. Chen Feng, put that down. That's our whole family's food ration. Your family's food ration? I set the bowl aside. My half gene of meat was my food ration too. Li Dahuai's expression changed, the kind of anger from being exposed to his face. He lowered his voice. Fengzi, even if Jizai and the others really did borrow something, that's their business. Why are you coming to my house and throwing your weight around? Their business? I pointed at the Kong. They live in your house, eat your food, use your things. If they borrow something and don't return it, if I don't come to you, who should I go to? I told you, I didn't borrow anything. Li Jizai stood up, red in the face and thick in the neck. Fengzi, don't make false accusations. I glanced at him and ignored him, turning to walk to the corner of the wall. There was a hoe leaning there, and beside it a wooden stool. I bent down and grabbed the wooden stool. What are you doing? Li Dahuai lifted his, but off the Kong. Teaching your son to remember. Bang. I swung the stool and smashed it right against the side of the stove. Dust and bits of plaster sifted down. The bowls and plates on the rack clattered and shook. A chipped coarse bowl rolled down and hit the ground with a smack, breaking in 2. My bowl. Wang Ho-hot shrieked. Remember now? I slammed the stool down on the ground and stared at Li Jizai. Li Jizai took half a step back, opened his mouth, and couldn't say a word. Of course he borrowed it. Half a month ago, the original owner somehow got hold of a piece of meat. These two brothers came to his door, half coaxing and half threatening, saying they would borrow half a gene and return it in a couple of days. The coward that the original owner was, he didn't even dare let out a peep. They took the meat and then disappeared completely. But he couldn't admit it. If he admitted it, he'd have to pay it back. Half a gene of meat, at a time like this, was worth more than life itself. Where was he supposed to get it from? Fengzi, even if you smash up my house, it won't do any good. Li Jizai jutted out his neck. If I didn't borrow it, then I didn't borrow it. What evidence do you have? I nodded. Fine. I raised the stool again. Wait. Li Dehuai jumped down from the Kong and grabbed a stool leg. Settle the hell down. If you smash this stove a couple more times, it'll collapse. Then make your son open his mouth and tell the truth. Jizai. Li Dehuai turned and roared at his eldest son. Did you borrow it or not? Li Jizai pressed his lips together, his face flushed red, and said nothing. Li Dehuai looked at his younger son again. Jiming. Li Jiming had been leaning against the wall without moving all this time. Now he slowly pulled his hand out of his sleeve and rolled his eyes. So what if we borrowed it? It's just half a gene of meat. Was it really necessary to come to our door and make a scene? Jiming. Li Dehuai glared at him. Oh good, as long as you admit it. I set the stool down. Then pay it back. Who said we pay it back? Li Jiming straightened up. He was half a head shorter than me, but his neck was stiff as a poker. Where are we supposed to get meat now? In a couple of days. In a couple of days? I tilted my head. Last time you also said 2 days. It's been half a month. How many 2 days have passed for you? You. Pay it back today, right now, immediately. Li Jiming's face darkened, and he pressed forward a step. Chen Feng, don't push your luck. What the hell are you? A 2-bit punk dares to come to my house and throw his weight around. He rolled up his sleeves. The atmosphere in the room instantly tightened. Li Dehuai said nothing. Wang Hohot hugged the broken bowl and glared at me, and Li Jizai also edged half a step forward. A family of 4, clearly determined to bully me to the bitter end. I stared at Li Jiming and suddenly smiled. Not because it was funny. It was the kind of smile you give when the accounts are settled and it's time to collect. Half a gene of meat, plus 1 gene of cornmeal. I enunciated each word. What? Li Dehuai thought he must have heard wrong. Interest. I swept my gaze over them. It's been half a month. There ought to be some interest, right? Half a gene of meat plus 1 gene of cornmeal? Li Jiming craned his neck forward, as if he hadn't heard clearly. Chen Feng, are you fucking dreaming? Dream my ass. I'm wide awake. Chen Feng took a step forward. Li Jiming didn't hesitate either. With a roll of his sleeves, he lunged up, his right fist cutting through the air straight at Chen Feng's face. In the village, this punch would count as pretty impressive. At the very least, he was willing to put force into it, and the direction was right too. But Chen Feng merely tilted his head to the left, and the fist brushed past his ear. Li Jiming swung at nothing, his whole body pitching forward half a step, all his weight thrown ahead, too far gone to pull back. Smack! A crisp sound rang out. Chen Feng's palm landed squarely on Li Jiming's left cheek. This slap wasn't for show. The force was measured just right. Painful enough, loud enough, unforgettable enough for a lifetime. Li Jiming spun half a turn like a top, his shoulder hitting the edge of the Kong first, then bouncing into the wall, the back of his head knocking against the mud wall as bits of dirt pattered down. He slid down along the wall and landed hard on his butt on the ground, his eyes rolling twice before he could figure out which way was north. The room went silent. Wang Hohot stood there with her mouth open, not even noticing that the sewing in her hand had fallen onto the Kong. Li Dehuai's smoking pipe hung in midair, his mouth opening and closing twice, yet not a single word came out. Li Jizai stayed crouched where he was, both legs seeming filled with lead, not moving an inch. Jiming. Wang Hohot came back to her senses and cried out in a shrill voice. Li Jiming was sprawled at the foot of the wall, the left side of his face swollen like a risen steamed bun, a thread of blood trailing from the corner of his mouth. He braced himself against the ground, trying to get up, but after straining twice with his arm, he couldn't hold himself up and collapsed back down. Chen Feng walked over. He lifted one foot and stepped on Li Jiming's back. It wasn't heavy, but Li Jiming was pinned to the ground like he had been nailed there, like a fish on a chopping block, able only to flop, not turn over. Let go of me, you motherfucker. Li Jiming's face was pressed to the ground, his mouth full of the earthy taste of dirt as he cursed indistinctly. Chen Feng didn't let up. Instead, he shifted his weight a little farther forward. I'll say this one more time, so listen carefully. Chen Feng looked down at the man under his foot, his voice calm and unhurried. Half a gene of meat, plus 1 gene of cornmeal, as interest. If you don't pay, I'll take that leg of yours off and burn it as firewood. Li Jiming's face twisted into a knot, and a few words squeezed through clenched teeth. You wouldn't dare. My dad is. Chen Feng pressed his foot down a little harder. Ah. Li Jiming's voice jumped an octave. Your dad? Your dad is standing right there. Why don't you have him save you? Chen Feng turned his head and glanced at Li Dahuai. Li Dahuai's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. He had lived 47 years, and in the village he was considered someone who had seen his share of the world. He had seen plenty of fights and brawls, but he had never seen someone fight the way Chen Feng did. When Li Jiming threw that punch, he saw it clearly. It was aimed straight for the face, a solid, full-force blow. On anyone else, it would have made them stagger. But Chen Feng acted as if he hadn't seen it at all. With a tilt of his head, he dodged it, and the backhanded slap he returned was so fast the eye could hardly follow it. This wasn't the kind of wild village brawl where people just swing their arms at each other. This was someone who knew how to fight. Li Dahuai, are you going to bail your son out or not? Chen Feng asked him. Li Dahuai's lips trembled twice. Fengzi, move your foot first. We can talk this out. Talk this out. Chen Feng pressed down a little harder. Aya, Dad. Li Jiming held on the ground. Fengzi, calm down. We were in the wrong about this. Li Dahuai rubbed his hands together, the wrinkles on his face trembling. Chen Feng looked at him with his head tilted. That's not what you were saying just now. I was confused just now. Li Dahuai bent his waist a little lower. Ji Tsai and the others borrowed your things. They should return them. They should. Dad. You. Li Ji Tsai panicked at the side. Shut the hell up. Li Dahuai roared at his eldest son, the veins on his neck bulging out. Then he turned back and put on a smile for Chen Feng. Fengzi, take your foot off him. Jiming is young and ignorant. Be magnanimous. Cut the useless crap. Chen Feng interrupted him. Hand over the stuff first. We really don't have half a gene of meat. Wang Hohat shouted from the Kong. Look at this house of ours. Where would there be any meat? Go ahead, search if you want. Fine, Chen Feng answered, and put a little more force into his foot. Ah, Mom, stop talking. Stop talking. Li Jiming squealed on the ground like a pig being slaughtered. Wang Hohat immediately shut her mouth, tears pattering down her face. Chen Feng's patience ran out. I'll count to 5. If you still haven't brought it out by then, I won't be stepping on his back anymore. I'll step on his hand. Li Jiming's body shook violently. His hand? If his hand is ruined, how's he supposed to work for the rest of his life? Dad, go get it now. He shouted at Li Dahuai while lying prone on the ground. 1. Chen Feng began counting. Wait. I'm going right now. Li Dahuai turned and ran to the outer room, limping and lurching as if one leg had gone lame. 2. Wang Hohat also slid down from the Kong and ran after Li Dahuai. 3. Sounds of rummaging through chests and overturning boxes came from the outer room. The sound of a vat lid knocking against the rim. The sound of a clay jar hitting the floor. 4. Here it is. Li Dahuai's voice drifted in from the outer room, tinged with tears. 5. Chen Feng didn't stop. Li Dahuai stumbled back in, clutching something wrapped in a tattered cloth in his hands, with a cloth sack tucked under his other arm. Li Dahuai came back trembling, holding that tattered cloth-wrapped thing, and nearly tripped over the threshold. Wang Hohat followed behind, clutching a cloth sack that was more than half deflated, her expression like someone cutting flesh off her body. Chen Feng's foot was still planted on Li Jiming's back, and he lowered his head to glance at what Li Dahuai was holding. Open it. Li Dahuai lifted the tattered cloth. It was a chunk of meat frozen rock hard, with a few bits of straw still stuck to it. Dark in color, looking like it had been there for quite a few days. Chen Feng reached out and hefted it. Li Dahuai, who are you trying to fool with this? This is all we have. Really, this is all. Li Dahuai's voice cracked. Look around this room. Where else could anything be hidden? Chen Feng turned the piece of meat over, scraped at its solid frozen surface with his fingernail, then brought it close to his nose and sniffed it. It hadn't gone bad. Frozen through solid, stored in weather like this, it could keep for quite a long time. The weight was right too, a little over half a gene. Fine. Chen Feng tucked the meat into his coat. Li Dahuai's shoulders visibly relaxed a notch, and he was just about to speak. Chen Feng's hand had already reached toward the cloth bag clutched in Wang Hohat's hands. Wang Hohat reflexively hid the bag behind her back. This is our family's cornmeal. It's none of your business. Interest. Chen Feng said only 2 words. What interest? We agreed on half a gene of meat. You got the meat. What more do you want? Wang Hohat's voice shot up several notches. Chen Feng lowered his head and glanced at Li Jiming at his feet. Li Jiming lay on the ground groaning, his left cheek pressed against the icy floor. That side of his face was swollen badly, and a thin trace of blood at the corner of his mouth ran down his chin into the dirt. What did I just say? Were you not listening or pretending to be deaf? Chen Feng moved his foot off Li Jiming's back. It wasn't out of soft-heartedness. He already had the meat, and keeping his foot there was just a bother. Li Jiming rolled halfway on the ground and pushed himself up to a sitting position with one arm, his right hand covering his left cheek, his eyes red-rimmed. He opened his mouth to curse, but when he saw Chen Feng's gaze sweep over, he swallowed the words back down. Chen Feng walked over to Wang Hohat. Wang Hohat took a step back until her back hit the stove. She hugged the bag tighter. This is what keeps our whole family alive. Our family of 4 is counting on this bit of grain to get by. Taking the meat wasn't enough, and now you want the meal too? Chen Feng, are you even human? Whether I'm human or not has nothing to do with you. Chen Feng held out his hand, palm up. Give it here. No, I won't give it to you even if you beat me to death. Chen Feng stopped wasting words and directly grabbed the bottom corner of the cloth bag. Wang Hohat clutched the opening for dear life and refused to let go. The two of them tugged at the bag from above and below like a tug of war. Old man, do something, she shouted at Li Dahuai. Li Dahuai stood where he was, his mouth opening and closing, his hands not knowing where to put themselves. Do something? How? He had just seen with his own eyes his younger son throw that punch. And Chen Feng's head tilted aside as if it had eyes and dodged it. Then that backhand slap came fast and sharp. Li Jiming was considered a pretty tough young man in the village, yet he was on the ground before he even lasted one exchange. For a 47-year-old old man with unsteady legs to charge in, wasn't that just asking to get beaten? Woman, give it to him. Li Dahuai's voice was dry and stiff. What? Wang Hohat's eyes went wide. What did you say? That's cornmeal. A whole gene of cornmeal. Do you know how many meals you can stretch a gene of cornmeal into if you're careful? I know, but if you really make him mad, forget 1 gene. Even 10 gene, he'd dare carry it all away. The corner of Wang Hohat's mouth twitched. Without waiting for her to figure it out, Chen Feng exerted force with his hand and yanked the bag straight out of her hands. Wang Hohat lunged and missed, landing on her backside beside the stove. My meal. Chen Feng weighed the bag in his hand. Light. There was at most only 1 gene of cornmeal inside. He pulled the mouth of the bag open and took a look. Inside was coarsely ground cornmeal, yellowish in color and mixed with some rough bran. Good enough to eat. Chen Feng, you damn bastard. Wang Hohat sat on the ground and started cursing, her voice shrill and thin. Chen Feng tied up the bag, slung it over his shoulder, pulled open the door, and swaggered out. Li Dahuai's legs went weak, and he dropped back onto the Kong with a thud, reaching for his pipe. His fingers shook so badly it took 3 tries before he managed to grasp it. Wang Hohat still sat by the stove, the curses in her mouth gradually fading into one wail after another. My cornmeal, my 1 gene of cornmeal, enough for us to scrimp on and eat for 2 days. Enough. Li Dahuai slammed his pipe onto the Kong. What are you wailing for? He's already gone. Who are you wailing for to hear? I'm wailing for you to hear. You spineless coward. You just stood there watching some hooligan come in and steal things. Are you even a man? Why didn't you go at him? Go on then. Li Dahuai pointed at the doorway. Didn't you see Jimin's face? 1 slap. Just 1 slap. You weigh it yourself. Could your old face have taken it? Wang Hohat fell silent. Li Jizai finally got up from the floor and patted the dirt off his pant legs, his lips pressed tightly together. Li Jimin also climbed up from the ground, bracing himself against the wall. His feet swayed twice before he managed to stand steady. The left side of his face was swollen like a steamed bun, and the corner of his mouth was split, so even when he spoke, air leaked out. Dad, we can't just let this go. Shut up, Li Dahuai roared, sounding far tougher now than he had when facing Chen Feng. If you had the guts to beat him, why didn't you do it just now? Why didn't you say that when you were lying on the ground yelping? Li Jimin was left speechless, his face flushing red from holding it in. The atmosphere was oppressively heavy and stifling. After a long while, Li Dahuai exhaled a puff of smoke and said in a deep voice, "Stay away from him from now on. Don't provoke him." Chen Feng stepped through the snow and returned to his own yard. He reached out and pushed at the door. It was locked tight. That meant they hadn't left. He raised his hand and banged on it twice. Bang, bang, bang. Open up. After a few breaths, the door creaked open a crack, revealing half of Lu Lan's face. Her eye sockets were red and swollen, and the tip of her nose was bright red from the cold. When she saw it was Chen Feng, her face immediately fell. Chen Feng paid no attention to her expression and squeezed inside sideways. Close the door. Lu Lan shut the door and slid the bolt into place, then leaned her whole body against the door panel, keeping far away from Chen Feng. Chen Feng walked straight to the stove in the outer room. took the cloth sack off his shoulder and set it on the stove, then pulled out from his coat that piece of frozen meat wrapped in rag scraps and slapped it onto the stove with a smack. It made quite a bit of noise. From the Kong in the inner room, Li Xuemei's voice came out. Sister-in-law. Xuemei, he's back, Lulan answered. Chen Feng ignored her, lifted the rag scraps wrapped around the meat. And there on the stove lay over half a gene of frozen meat, hard as a rock. Beside it, the cloth sack sat open, with the cornmeal inside faintly showing. Lulan glanced toward the stove. Her steps faltered for a beat. Then she took another 2 steps forward, her eyes fixed on the chunk of meat on the stove, as if she had been nailed to the spot. This is meat. Her voice had changed. It no longer carried that tone from just now, as if she wanted to swallow Chen Feng alive, but instead held a trace of stunned disbelief. If it's not meat, is it a rock? Chen Feng cut in. Lulan's throat bobbed, and her gaze shifted from the meat to the cloth sack beside it, then back again. Her lips trembled twice, as if she wanted to ask something, but then swallowed the words back down. Xuemei. Lulan suddenly raised her voice and called toward the inner room. What is it? Li Xuemei's voice was weak. Come out and have a look. Rustling sounds came from the Kong in the inner room. And after quite a while, Li Xuemei came out, supporting herself on the doorframe. Her gaze fell on the stove, staring at that piece of meat for 3 or 4 seconds. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then she looked at the sack of cornmeal beside it. Where did this come from? Li Xuemei's voice trembled. Why do you care where it came from? Chen Feng didn't explain. Li Xuemei edged 2 more steps forward, staring at the frozen meat, and a gulp sounded in her throat. She had genuinely swallowed her saliva. It really is meat. Beside her, Lulan reached out and touched the surface of the frozen meat. Her fingertips touched the icy pork skin and quickly pulled back, not because it was cold, but because she was excited. And there's another pound of cornmeal, Chen Feng said. Lulan's eyes reddened instantly. These 2 things, in the winter of 1960, meant life. This wasn't an exaggeration. They really could save lives. This good-for-nothing hadn't lied to Xuemei. Li Xuemei was also dumbfounded. She truly hadn't expected Chen Feng to really keep his promise. Have you stared enough? If you have, then hurry up and cook. One of you tend the fire, one of you cut the meat. I've been hungry all day. Li Xuemei turned sideways, refusing to look at Chen Feng. What did you say? Your ears don't work? Cook. You want me to cook for you? Li Xuemei's voice rose sharply. Got a problem with that? Chen Feng tilted his head and looked at her. Li Xuemei's fists clenched inside her sleeves. What gives you the right to order me around? Because I brought back the grain. Chen Feng's reply was crisp and blunt. That is what you owed me. Don't want to do it? If you don't, then get out now. I won't give you even an ounce of meat. There was no room for negotiation in Chen Feng's tone. Li Xuemei stared at that hunk of meat, her face flushing bright red. Then I'll go. She had only just said it when her voice suddenly stopped. Because Xiaoling wasn't fit to travel right now. Even a short trip would be dangerous, and there wasn't any firewood at home either. Xuemei. Lulan hurriedly spoke up. She felt the same as Xuemei, worried about Xiaoling and worried about Xuemei too. Sister-in-law. Li Xuemei turned to look at her. Let's cook first. After saying that, Lulan went to the stove, and as she passed Chen Feng, she looked at him and froze for 2 seconds, her expression complicated. In the end, she still lowered her head and softly said, I'm sorry, Wai, don't drive us away. Chen Feng glanced at Lulan and thought that this woman wasn't blind after all. That earlier excitement was understandable too. When you're a mother, you'll do anything for your child. And as a sister-in-law, she could stand up to anyone for the sake of her husband's younger sister. After speaking to Chen Feng, Lulan reached for the kitchen knife placed above the stove. Her body swayed, and she had to brace herself against the stove to keep from falling. I'll cut the meat. Xuemei, you tend the fire. Li Xuemei paused for a few seconds, but in the end she still crouched down. It took 2 strikes before she got the match to light. Then she stuffed it into the kindling at the bottom of the stove. And with a whoosh the flames leaped up, the corn cobs in the fire pit crackling and popping. She grabbed the bellows handle nearby and started pumping it with clack-clack sounds. Over by the stove, Lulan had already started dealing with the frozen meat. The meat was frozen solid and couldn't be chopped with the kitchen knife, so she could only set the pot on first and add a little water. Then toss the meat in to let the hot water soften it a bit before cutting it once the surface thawed. The water in the pot bubbled away. The surface of the frozen meat slowly changed color, and a strong raw meat smell rose up. Xiaoling squatted by the stove, craning her nose upward and sniffing hard with loud snuffling sounds. Mom, it smells so good. Good? Chun Feng smelled only the smoky stink of burning firewood. Good my ass. Without seasonings, it could only fill the stomach. It's not cooked yet, wait. Lu Lan turned the meat over with the spatula. I don't want to wait, I want to eat now? Xiaoling stamped her feet anxiously. What are you making such a fuss about? If you keep yelling, you won't get any to eat later. Chun Feng suddenly threw in a remark from the side. Should a child just be spoiled? If she doesn't listen, she doesn't eat. Xiaoling jumped in fright, looked up at Chun Feng, then shrank her head behind her mother's leg and didn't dare make a sound, though her eyes were still sneaking glances at the pot. Lu Lan fished out the meat, now thawed on the surface, and placed it on the cutting board. The kitchen knife chopped down stroke by stroke, her wrist putting in force, each slice trembling as it was cut. Her knife skills were poor, but she couldn't bear to waste anything, not even the skin and sinew on the meat. Even tiny meat scraps the size of fingernails were nudged into the bowl with the tip of the knife. Bring the cornmeal. Lu Lan called back over her shoulder. Chun Feng pushed that cloth bag a little toward her. Lu Lan poured the corn flour into the clay basin and mixed in water, kneading with both hands in the basin. There wasn't enough strength in her fingers, and it took quite a while before she finally kneaded the dough evenly. With a pat and a press of her palm, she stuck them to the inner wall of the iron pot one after another. A ring of golden yellow cakes lined up around it. The cut pieces of meat also went into the pot to stew together with half a pot of water. The salt jar was pried open, and there was actually still salt inside? Shocked, the pot lid was put on. Chun Feng said to cook it all. Before long, the smell of meat broth began to seep out through the crack of the lid. Though it didn't smell all that good, they were truly craving it. There was still nothing to eat yet. Even Lu Lan's hands were trembling as she kneaded the dough. Even Li Xuemei unconsciously quickened the pace of working the bellows. Clack, 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 she pulled faster and faster. Chun Feng crossed his arms over his chest, and at some point his gaze had shifted away from the pot. He looked at Li Xuemei squatting in front of the stove pit. The heat from the stove chamber had flushed her face red. Her waist was wrapped in a loose cotton-padded jacket, but when she squatted down, that curve still couldn't be hidden. She raised her hand to add a piece of firewood into the stove chamber. As her arm stretched out, the sleeve of her cotton-padded jacket slid up a bit, revealing a small section of wrist, startlingly white. Chun Feng's Adam's apple bobbed. Li Xuemei seemed to sense something and suddenly turned her head. The two people's gazes collided in the outer room. Chun Feng didn't look away. Li Xuemei's face instantly burned up. She shot Chun Feng a fierce glare and turned her head back. By the time they finished eating, it was already completely dark. Outside, the wind howled, and the window paper bulged in and out from the blowing. Inside, the kerosene lamp had only the last bit of oil left, and the flame had shrunk to the size of a mung bean. Lu Lan cleared away the bowls and chopsticks and scrubbed the pots and bowls clean too. Li Xuemei stuffed the last 2 pieces of firewood into the stove chamber. The sparks leaped once and then died. The Kong was still warm, enough to last until the second half of the night. Put out the lamp, it's wasting oil. Chun Feng sat on the Kong and took off his cotton-padded jacket, setting it by the head of the Kong. Oh, Lu Lan still walked over and turned the wick down a little. The bean-sized flame flickered twice, then went out. The room went dark all at once. It was the kind of darkness where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Xiaoling was already asleep, curled up at the very inner side of the Kong, against the wall. After eating a few pieces of meat and half a cornmeal cake, the little girl's belly was round and full, and as soon as her head touched the pillow, she was out cold. Get on the Kong and sleep. Chun Feng's voice came from the darkness. Li Xuemei stood by the edge of the Kong and didn't get on. Xuemei, get on the Kong. Lu Lan called softly. Feeling her way in the dark, Li Xuemei found a spot beside Xiaoling and laid down on her side. She pressed close to Xiaoling, with her back facing outward from the Kong, wrapping herself up tightly. Lu Lan also got onto the Kong and lay on Xiaoling's other side, with a 4-year-old child between herself and Li Xuemei. This Kong wasn't big to begin with, and with 4 people squeezed onto it, even turning over was difficult. Chun Feng got on last. He lay down on Li Xuemei's side, and the whole Kong was full. The 4 of them lay in a row, Chun Feng on the very outside, right by the edge of the Kong. Li Xuemei pressed close beside him, Xiaoling in the middle, and Lu Lan by the wall. In the darkness, no one could see anyone else's face. It was quiet for a short while, with only the sound of the wind outside and Xiaoling's even breathing. Then Li Xuemei's body suddenly went rigid. An arm reached over from behind and settled around her waist. Her breathing instantly turned uneven. You, Shu. Chun Feng's voice was right behind her ear, his warm breath brushing the back of her neck. Li Xuemei grabbed his wrist, trying to push that arm away. She put strength into it, but Qin Feng's arm didn't budge at all. Instead, it drew back a little, pulling her whole body into his embrace. Li Xuemei's back pressed against Qin Feng's chest. "Let go," she said in a hushed voice, so thin it was like a mosquito's buzz. Qin Feng didn't let go. His arm tightened even more. Li Xuemei was trapped in his arms, unable to move. "What are you doing? There are people right next to us." Li Xuemei's voice was edged with urgency, her teeth grinding audibly. "Sleep. You call this sleeping?" The quilt all went to the little girl. "If I don't hold you, won't you freeze to death?" "You." Li Xuemei was trembling with anger, but she didn't dare raise her voice. Xiaoling was asleep right beside them, and sister-in-law was there too. She twisted desperately twice, but Qin Feng's arm was like an iron hoop. The more she struggled, the tighter it got. "Move again, and I won't just be holding you." Li Xuemei immediately went still. Her face was burning hot, like her whole face was being roasted over the stove pit. It couldn't be seen in the dark, but she knew it herself. Her face was so hot it could practically fry an egg. Qin Feng's hand rested at the side of her waist, over her padded jacket, staying honestly still. But the position itself made Li Xuemei uncomfortable all over. His breathing landed again and again on the back of her neck. Steady as if counting. She clenched her teeth and didn't make a sound. This hooligan. With Xiaoling between them, Lulan lay with her eyes open, staring at the pitch-black ceiling. She couldn't see anything, but she could hear everything. She could especially hear the rustling sound of the padded jacket brushing against the quilt. Lulan's heart twisted into a knot. Her hand found Xiaoling's arm beside her and gripped it, as if grasping some kind of support. Lulan knew Li Xuemei was enduring it. That bastard had gone out that afternoon and gotten meat and cornmeal. And after eating his food, Lulan couldn't bring herself to say anything forceful. This hoodlum really had ruined Xuemei. And now he was hugging and pawing at her right in front of her. Lulan turned over to face the wall and covered her ears with the corner of the quilt. It was useless. She could still hear it. There was movement over there again. "Where are you putting your hand?" Li Xuemei's voice was even lower now, so low it was almost nothing but breath. "I'm not putting it anywhere. Your waist is poking my hand here, so I'm moving it somewhere else." "You? What do you mean, you? Aren't you warmer now too?" Li Xuemei fell silent. This bastard's logic was simply outrageous. After a while, Lulan heard Li Xuemei's breathing grow rapid and shallow again, as if she were desperately holding something back. This bastard. Even sleeping comes with a concealed weapon. She hated it so much her nails dug into her own palm. But with her body pinned in Qin Feng's arms, she couldn't break free or get away. Gradually, whether because she was tired or because the Kong really was warm, her body little by little wasn't quite so stiff anymore. Qin Feng noticed. He said nothing, and his arm didn't loosen either. His hand stayed where it should. In the darkness, no one spoke. Qin Feng closed his eyes, thinking, with 4 people living together, we need to find a room on the east or west side, otherwise wouldn't that be hard on the brothers and sisters? Back when they were eating yesterday afternoon, Li Xiaoling let it slip and revealed her family's situation. Their resources were exhausted, and when they went back, they wouldn't even have any firewood. So they definitely wouldn't move out. If they did, they would die. So Qin Feng told them that if they wanted to stay here, they could. 2 conditions. First, obey. Second, contribute labor. Before dawn, Qin Feng woke up. At some point, Li Xuemei in his arms had turned over. Facing him, her head tucked under his chin, her hand clutching the front of his cotton jacket tightly. She was well behaved when asleep, at least. Qin Feng didn't move her and slowly pulled his arm out, bracing himself on the edge of the Kong as he sat up. The Kong had lost more than half its warmth. No one had added fuel in the second half of the night, so the temperature had dropped quickly. Xiaoling was curled into a ball, and Lulan was huddled over by the wall, facing it. Qin Feng put on his cotton jacket and tiptoed off the Kong. The outer room was even colder. Every breath he exhaled turned to white mist. He didn't hurry to start the fire, just stood in front of the stove and looked at that deflated cloth sack. Last night, they had cut up half a jean of meat and slapped a few flatbreads onto the pan. After 4 people ate, there wasn't much left. There was less than half a jean of cornmeal left in the sack, and that chunk of frozen meat was only a fist-sized piece now. It wouldn't last 2 days. If they wanted to live, they had to find food. So going up the mountain was a very good option. But to go hunting in the mountains empty-handed? Hunt with what? Qin Feng leaned against the stove with both hands tucked into his sleeves, his mind racing. A slingshot, a bow and arrows, a wire snare. If he could get any one of them, he could head into the mountains. He rummaged around in the outer room, pulled out a half-burned wooden stick, and weighed it in his hand. No, he had to get a proper weapon. Chun Feng pushed open the door, and a gust of cold wind poured over him. Daybreak had only just come, and everything was dim and gray, the snowfield reflecting a ghastly pale light. Fresh snow had piled up in the yard overnight, and it crunched underfoot when stepped on. He rubbed his hands, hunched his neck, and walked out. He had thought it over all night. A slingshot was easy to make, but it couldn't take down big game. A wire snare required wire. A bow and arrows would be the handiest, but carving one himself would take quite a bit of work, and without good wood, whatever he made would be a limp, useless thing. The fastest way, find a ready-made one. Chun Feng walked east along the packed snow path running through the middle of the village, sorting through the original owner's memories in his mind. Although the original owner was a good-for-nothing, after wandering all over the village for so many years, he knew at least a little about which family had what reserves. Li Dahuai's family had a hunting bow. This the original owner remembered clearly, because he had once coveted that bow, only he hadn't had the guts to ask for it. Halfway there, a figure appeared ahead in the snow. Li Jiming. The kid was wrapped in a ragged cotton jacket, shrinking his neck as he came out of his yard, carrying a shoulder pole on his shoulder and a bow in his right hand. A bow. Chun Feng's steps paused for a moment. It was that bow. The bow stave was birch, the string was twisted from ox sinew, and the limbs were about a cubit long. It wasn't big, but at that size it was already considered good stuff in the village. Li Jiming saw Chun Feng too. The two of them stood face to face on the snowy path, a dozen or so steps apart. Li Jiming's pace had obviously slowed. There was still the mark of yesterday's slap on the left side of his face. The swelling had mostly gone down, but the bruise was still there, a dark patch, like it had been smeared with soot from the bottom of a pot. He stopped, neither moving forward nor retreating. Chun Feng stared at the bow in his hand and strode toward him. Chun Feng, don't. Li Jiming instinctively took half a step back, but before he could finish, he forcibly stopped himself. He clenched his teeth, puffed out his chest, and slung the bow behind his back. What are you looking at? Looking at you. Chun Feng didn't stop walking. I'm telling you. About what happened yesterday. Li Jiming's voice rose a little. My dad told me to stay out of your way, but I, Li Jiming, am no coward. Don't think that just because you slapped me once you can. Chun Feng couldn't be bothered to listen to his nonsense. 10 steps, 8 steps, 5 steps. Watching Chun Feng get closer and closer. That imposing air bore down on him, yet he still kept up a tough front. What do you want? I'm telling you, I'm not alone today. My brother's right behind. 3 steps. Chun Feng lifted his foot and kicked. The kick landed in Li Jiming's lower abdomen. It wasn't too heavy, but Li Jiming was already standing on the snow, his footing slippery, and his whole body toppled backward. The shoulder pole flew off, the bow slipped from his hand, and he fell flat on his back into the snow, the back of his head smacking against the packed snow, stars bursting before his eyes. Ow! Chun Feng took 2 quick steps forward and planted a foot on Li Jiming's chest. The same move as yesterday, the same spot, the same force. Lying in the snow, Li Jiming had his chest pinned under that foot. He kicked his legs twice, but couldn't budge. His face flushed bright red, and the side of his face that had been slapped yesterday started throbbing again. You damn again? Li Jiming struggled to get up, but Chun Feng's foot held him down fast. I'm asking you, whose bow is this? Chun Feng bent down and picked the bow up from the snow. The birch bow felt good in the hand, the string was taut. He flicked it with his index finger, and it gave a crisp twang. Good stuff. That's my family's bow. Put it down. Li Jiming yelled, kicking his legs on the ground. Chun Feng turned the bow over to inspect the limbs, then ran his hand along the string and drew it half open to test the draw weight. Good enough, more than enough for pheasants, and rabbits would be no problem either. But rabbits are nocturnal, so you could hardly hunt them. Chun Feng, are you damn well robbing me? Chun Feng looked down at him. Yeah, I am robbing you. What are you going to do about it? The corners of Li Jiming's mouth twitched twice. He had never seen anyone so shameless. He lay in the snow with a foot on his chest. The slap he took yesterday still burned hot, and now he'd been kicked over again. Worse still, that line he'd just said about my brother being right behind me was pure bullshit. His brother Li Jitsai hadn't come out with him at all. He was alone. Chun Feng, just you wait. I'll go get my dad, get my brother, get everyone in the whole village to come deal with you. Then call them. Chun Feng squatted down, propped an elbow on his knee, and tapped Li Jiming on the tip of the nose with the end of the bow. If you call them, I'll just tell them this. The younger son of Li Dahuai's family, carrying a hunting bow up the mountain at the crack of dawn. What were you going to do? Hunt. Li Jiming shut his mouth. Chun Feng continued. The production team's bow, you secretly took it out to use. If the brigade leader finds out, what do you think will happen to your dad? Li Jiming's expression changed. This bow really wasn't his family's. It was property of the production team. After the hunting party disbanded in the fall, the bows and several wire snares had all been collected back to the team headquarters. Li Dahuai kept the work point records, and taking advantage of his position, he secretly hid this birch bough in his own family's shed. Hardly anyone in the village knew about it, but Chen Feng did. To be precise, the original owner knew. That useless loafer, the original owner, wandered around the village all day and had seen Li Jiming taking the bough out of the shed in the middle of the night. He remembered it all along, just never had the guts to say anything. Now he had the guts. Why you? How do you know? Li Jiming's voice dropped a notch. Chen Feng didn't answer that and moved his foot off his chest, straightened up, and patted the snow dust off his hands. Li Jiming climbed up from the ground, brushing the snow off his backside, his eyes darting back and forth between Chen Feng and the bough, a fine sweat beading on his forehead. Chen Feng, give me back the bough, and let's both pretend this never happened. Give it back? Chen Feng took the bough off his shoulder and weighed it in his hand a couple of times. Let me ask you, carrying this bough up the mountain, did you actually hit anything? Li Jiming said nothing. Did you? No. Look at you, what a waste of a good bough. Chen Feng clicked his tongue. You carried it all over the mountain. What if you ran into the militia on patrol? What if you ran into people from the commune coming down to inspect? The moment your dad hiding public property gets exposed, it's over. Li Jiming's Adam's apple bobbed. It wasn't that he had never thought about that. Every time he snuck the bough out, his heart pounded, and even seeing a person's shadow on the road made his legs go weak. But there really was nothing to eat at home, and his father had told him to try and see if he could bring back a pheasant. Let me tell you something. Chen Feng's tone suddenly changed, putting away the earlier fierceness and instead taking on a somewhat earnest, persuasive air. You haul the production team's bough all over the mountain. Not hitting anything is a small matter, but if someone catches sight of you, your dad's life will be dragged down with it. Li Jiming opened his mouth, but didn't argue. You think you're the only one who knows about this bough? Chen Feng stepped half a pace closer and lowered his voice. You know Aunt Zhou's mouth. If one day she lets it slip, your whole family will be standing at a struggle session. Li Jiming's face instantly turned white. Aunt Zhou's mouth was the loudspeaker of the entire East Village, even more effective than the tin loudspeaker on the roof of the team office. Once anything passed through her mouth, the whole village would know within half a day. Then what should we do? Li Jiming's voice was trembling. Here it comes. Chen Feng was blooming with joy inside, but didn't show a bit of it on his face. Instead, he frowned, looking as if he were worrying on Li Jiming's behalf. Keeping this bough at your house is a disaster waiting to happen. Taking it out to use is even worse. Sooner or later someone will see it. Sooner or later someone will report it. And when the charge of stealing public property gets pinned on your dad, he'll never shake it off for the rest of his life. Li Jiming swallowed. But if this bough stays in my hands, it's different. How is it different? What kind of person am I? A loafer. Chen Feng patted his own chest. In the village, who thinks highly of me? Nobody. If I carry a bough up the mountain, who cares? Who gives it a second thought? At most they'll say that bastard somehow got hold of another broken bough from who knows where, and that's the end of it. No one will look into it further. Li Jiming froze. That seemed to make a little sense. But that's my family's, my dad hid it. He's talking nonsense. Your dad hid it? Fine. Then this bough was stolen by your dad. In your shed it's stolen goods. In your hands it's evidence of a crime. Chen Feng flicked a finger against the bough limb. Think about it. If I take it away for you, your house will be clean. Later, if the commune comes to investigate and turns your shed upside down, they won't find a thing. Wouldn't your dad be safe then? Li Jiming's head was buzzing. He felt that something was off, but he couldn't put his finger on what. Every sentence Chen Feng said seemed reasonable on its own, and sounded even more reasonable strung together. The bough really was a ticking time bomb sitting at home. If someone reported it, his dad would truly be in deep trouble. But if Chen Feng took the bough away, wouldn't it still be gone? It's not like I'm taking it from you for nothing. Chen Feng seemed to see right through his thoughts. If I take the bough up the mountain and bag something, I'll give you a share. You don't have to take any risks. And you still get to eat meat, plus your family's trouble is gone. So tell me, are you losing out or coming out ahead? Give me a share? The more Li Jiming listened, the more it felt off. If you want to know whether I keep my word, go back and ask your dad about that pound of meat and that pound of cornmeal yesterday. Have I ever owed your family even a single day on credit? Besides, Chen Feng added, yesterday I stepped on you and left right after. I didn't demand so much as a single hair extra from you. Today I kicked you, and after that I didn't beat you either. Try offending someone else in the village and see what happens. That kid Zhao Yuhua is way harsher than me. Last time somebody's chicken ran into his yard, he twisted its neck and stewed it on the spot. When the owner came to his door, he even turned around and blamed him instead. At least I reasoned things out with you. Li Jiming stood in the snow, his head feeling like it was stuffed with paste. He'd been kicked, and the bow had been taken, but listening to Chen Feng put it this way, it somehow seemed like he had gotten the better end of it. Then, you'll really give me a share? Why would I lie to you? Lie to you just so you'd have meat to eat? Chen Feng hoisted the bow onto his shoulder, along with several arrows. Go on back. Don't just stand there in the snow like a post. If you freeze yourself sick, it'll just waste grain raising you. Li Jiming stood where he was, watching Chen Feng stride toward the east end of the village with the bow on his shoulder, still dazed. He kept feeling like he'd been sold and was still helping count the money, yet he couldn't figure out where exactly things had gone wrong. The bow was gone, but so was the disaster. He scratched his head, tucked the shoulder pole under his arm, turned, and headed home. After a few steps, he stopped and looked back once more at Chen Feng's retreating figure. This guy, is there something wrong with his head? Robbing people and still making it sound so convincing. He muttered, hunched his neck, and walked home. After leaving the village, Chen Feng followed the old path along the foot of the mountain upward. The snow at the foot of the mountain was half a man's height deep, but near the woods, where the wind had blown through. The snowpack was actually thinner, only up to his calves when he stepped in it. Chen Feng bent over and slipped into the edge of the woods. Pine and birch trees grew mixed together, their branches laden with snow. And now and then a gust of wind would send it rustling down. There was no wind in the woods. Snow pressed heavily on the pine branches in thick layers, and every so often a clump would drop on its own, hitting the ground with a muffled thump. Other than that, there was no sound at all. Chen Feng crouched down. There was a string of tracks on the snow. Not footprints. The snowfall last night had covered most of the old traces, but this set was fresh. 3 toes facing forward, 1 toe back, with little space between them. The scratch marks were shallow, and the edges hadn't been scattered by the wind yet. Chen Feng used his forefinger to brush aside the loose snow beside them, revealing a small lump of dark green droppings underneath that hadn't frozen solid yet. A pheasant, probably, and it was nearby. He straightened up without hurrying after it. First, he took a look around at the terrain. To the left was a row of old pine trees, their trunks so thick that one person couldn't wrap their arms around them. To the right was a patch of low shrubs, their branches crusted with ice, and the snow beneath had been scratched open by something, exposing withered yellow grass roots. The tracks came from the side of the pine trees, made a turn, and headed toward the brush. Chen Feng didn't walk straight at it. He circled in an arc and stalked over from downwind. Pheasants are hard to hunt in winter. You have to be careful. Pheasants are very skittish, and at the slightest sound they'll fly off at once. But they do have one weakness: they're greedy. Once a pheasant finds a spot where it can scratch up grass seeds, it'll keep coming back. In front of the brush, the scratch marks in the snow grew denser and denser. Chen Feng lowered himself, almost crawling forward, pressed against the snow. Before long, he stopped moving and slowly poked his head out. A very handsome and beautiful pheasant, a male. Sure enough, the males are better looking. It had a white ring around its neck, and its long tail feathers dragged across the snow. It wasn't very big, a little over 500 grams or so, and had its head buried in a hollow in the snow, scratching for food. Chen Feng reached behind his back and drew an arrow from the quiver. Slowly, very slowly. When the arrow was knocked, the bow limbs made an extremely faint sound. The pheasant didn't react and kept scratching. Chen Feng drew the bow, the arrowhead aimed at the pheasant's head, then the body below. At a distance of 30 meters, it depended on the quality of the bow. It was a bit difficult. He narrowed his eyes, took aim, and let go. Shoot. The sound of the bowstring snapping back and the arrow slicing through the air rang out almost at the same time. Whoosh. The arrow pierced the pheasant's breast, the entire arrowhead sinking in, the force pushing it back half a foot. The pheasant flapped its wings twice and kicked its legs, almost managing to fly away. Chen Feng quickly ran over, pinned the pheasant's comb with one hand, and twisted hard. Crack. Then he pulled out the damn arrow, and fresh blood spurted out, but it didn't matter. It would soon finish draining. Chen Feng weighed it in his hand, a little over 500 grams. Although it was a bit skinny, his luck wasn't bad. He carried the pheasant upside down and walked back, casually plucking the feathers downward as he went. One step, one handful. One step, one handful. If you don't strip off all its clothes while it's still warm, once it gets cold, it won't pluck easily, so you have to do it while it's still warm. Home. At 2 p.m., he finally got home. Chen Feng dragged a bundle of firewood, pushed open the courtyard gate, and walked to the door and knocked. Knock, knock, knock. Who is it? Lu Lan's voice came muffled from behind the door panel. Open the door, Chen Feng said in a deep voice. The door creaked open a crack. Lu Lan pulled the door open. Chen Feng first unloaded a bundle of firewood from his shoulder and leaned it by the door. Lu Lan instinctively reached out to take it, and her hand had just touched the bundle when the corner of her eye caught sight of what Chen Feng was carrying in his other hand. Her movement froze. A chicken. A completely bare, thoroughly plucked, gutted wild pheasant. Its neck drooped, and there was a hole in its breast. The blood had long since drained out, and it was frozen stiff. Though it had no feathers left, that size and that shape made it obvious at a glance that it was a ring-necked pheasant from the mountains. Lu Lan's mouth fell open and stayed that way for a long while. Come inside first. Chen Feng turned sideways and squeezed through the doorframe, stuffed the pheasant into Lu Lan's arms, and casually set the firewood aside. Bang! The door shut. Lu Lan held the pheasant, both hands trembling. Chen Feng, he caught prey? Was it hunted? Otherwise, where did the firewood come from? He knows how to hunt? How does he have the tools to hunt? Shuemei? Lu Lan carried the pheasant into the inner room. Li Shuemei's gaze fell on the pheasant, and she froze for a moment. A wild pheasant. Lu Lan's voice tightened. He brought it back. Li Shuemei stared at the pheasant for several seconds, her lips moving, but no words came out. Chen Feng patted the bits of snow off his body. The two women on the Kong were both staring at him. Their eyes were full of shock, unwilling to believe it. Chen Feng took the bow off his shoulder and leaned it together with the quiver in the corner by the wall. What are you looking at? Never seen a pheasant before? Lu Lan came back to her senses, hurriedly wiped her eyes with her sleeve, and asked in a low voice. You went up the mountain? Chen Feng sat down on the edge of the Kong, took off his winter boots, and stretched his feet onto the Kong to warm them. He jerked his chin toward the pheasant in Lu Lan's arms. Hurry up and get to it. I'm hungry. I'll go right away. Lu Lan swallowed hard and hurried to the outer room. She had eaten Chen Feng's meat yesterday, so she had a bit more strength now. Chen Feng glanced at Li Shuemei and asked, Does it still hurt? Li Shuemei came back to her senses and gave a cold snort, then limped off the Kong to help. For in the afternoon, the big iron pot in the outer room was bubbling away with steam. Holding a cleaver, Lu Lan chopped the plucked pheasant into small pieces. She worked extremely deftly, raising and dropping the knife with speed, her body swaying with the motion. That coarse cloth outfit couldn't hide her full figure at all, especially when she bent over to add firewood to the stove. The curve of her backside stretched round and tight. Chen Feng sat cross-legged on the head of the Kong in the inner room, enjoying the free scenery through the doorway. This widowed sister-in-law really did have something. She was capable at work, and her figure was plenty enticing too. The water in the pot came to a boil, and Lu Lan put in the chicken pieces. Before long, a rich, meaty smell slipped through the crack in the door into the inner room, drilling straight into people's nostrils. These days, what family could smell meat? This scent was enough to hook a person's soul right out, even though it wasn't fragrant. As Lu Lan stirred the meat soup in the pot, her heart was in turmoil. Yesterday, she had wanted nothing more than to chop Chen Feng with a knife. Today, looking at the pot of boiling chicken, the resentment in her heart had long since flown beyond the clouds. This man might be a bastard, but he could get meat. In this winter when people were starving to death, if he could let the three of us have a mouthful of hot meat soup, not to mention having me serve and cook. Even if you made me do something else, I'd accept it. Lu Lan secretly glanced at Chen Feng on the Kong. Why did this hooligan look more and more pleasing to the eye today? Fengzi, the food's ready. She had even changed the way she addressed him. Lu Lan carried a big earthenware basin into the room and set it on the Kong table. Beside it were 4 large cornmeal flatbreads. Li Shaoling had long been drooling with craving, leaning over the edge of the Kong table and staring eagerly at the meat in the basin. Chen Feng picked up a wooden ladle and started portioning it out. He first fished out 2 big drumsticks for himself, plus a big piece of chicken breast, filling a large bowl to the brim with both meat and broth. Then he served Shaoling a bowl of meat soup, picking out 2 pieces of soft, tender chicken for her. Eat up, don't burn yourself. Chen Feng pushed the bowl over. Shaoling grabbed a flatbread and shoveled it into her mouth with the meat soup, slurping from the heat, but unwilling to stop. Thank you, Uncle Chen. Shaoling called out indistinctly. Lu Lan had taught her that. Chen Feng served Lu Lan another bowl, giving her plenty of meat. Lulan was flattered and nodded repeatedly. Thank you, Fengzi. Finally, Chen Feng ladled half a bowl of soup, added a chicken wing, a chicken butt, and some scraps of meat, and pushed it in front of Li Xiumei. Li Xiumei huddled at the end of the Kong, far away from the Kong table. Ever since Chen Feng came in, she hadn't given him a pleasant look. The humiliation of last night was still vivid in her mind. This bastard had taken her innocence. And today he was putting on an act of being a good person here. Come over and eat. Chen Feng tapped the table. Li Xiumei turned her head away and wouldn't even look at the bowl of meat soup. I'm not eating. Heh. Chen Feng laughed. You've got some backbone. What? Don't like the taste of the pheasant I shot? Li Xiumei gave a cold snort. Anything you bring, I think is filthy. The moment those words came out, the atmosphere in the room dropped to freezing point. Lulan was startled and quickly put down her bowl, reaching out to tug at Li Xiumei's sleeve. Xiumei, what nonsense are you talking? Hurry over and eat. This is meat. Li Xiumei shook off Lulan's hand in one motion. Sister-in-law, if you can stomach it, I can't. Have you forgotten how he bullied me yesterday? Lulan was left speechless for a moment. Xiumei had lost her chastity for the sake of the two of them, mother and daughter, and it pained her deeply. If possible, she would rather the one who had lost her chastity were herself. But what could I do? Could they really not eat? Then what about her daughter? What about Xiumei? Wouldn't that mean she had lost her chastity for nothing? Lulan wanted to persuade her, but it felt as if something was blocking her heart. Chen Feng put down his chopsticks and looked at Li Xiumei. What did you say? He felt Li Xiumei had something wrong with her. Before, she had given herself to him for half a gene of meat. Now he was letting her eat for free, and she was still putting on a cold face? Who spoiled you? Li Xiumei jutted out her neck and thrust out her chest. I said I won't eat. Even if I starve to death, I won't eat a single bite of your food. Chen Feng nodded, then directly reached out and picked up the bowl of meat soup in front of Li Xiumei. Good, then I'll eat more myself. He turned around and poured the chicken, but from that bowl into Xiaoling's bowl. Little brat, it's for you. Xiaoling didn't care about any of that. Seeing an extra piece of meat in her bowl, she clapped her hands with delight. Li Xiumei froze. She had thought Chen Feng would say a couple words to coax her, or force her to eat. After all, this man had been so overbearing toward her today. Chen Feng didn't look at her. He picked up the flatbread, took a bite, and chewed it with the chicken soup until it crunched. Let me make this clear. In this house, I'm heaven. Don't think the food I bring back was blown in by the wind. Don't want to eat? The door's over there. Get the hell out and go drink the northwest wind yourself. Lulan panicked and quickly pleaded on behalf of her sister-in-law. Fengzi, don't stoop to her level. She's just having a hard time coming to terms with it for the moment. Why don't you serve her another bowl? Chen Feng shot Lulan a sidelong glance. If you say one more word, I won't even let the little brat eat the chicken butt. Lulan immediately shut her mouth, not daring to utter a peep. Her daughter was the apple of her eye, and it was rare for her to have eaten meat for 2 meals in a row. Xiumei, she called out, wanting her to soften a little. Li Xiumei turned her head away. Lulan sighed, eating half and saving half, planning to give it to Li Xiumei. Little did she know, Chen Feng saw it and directly ate Lulan's half too. You. Lulan frowned and managed only that one word. Chen Feng glared at her, and she couldn't say anything more. He kept eating. The wild chicken meat was a bit tough, but it was purely natural and pollution-free, so it was barely acceptable. Chen Feng even deliberately chewed the bones with loud cracking sounds, and the noise of him slurping the soup was loud enough to carry into the yard. Li Xiumei curled up in the corner of the Kong, her eyes red. She was hungry, really hungry. When she smelled the meat, it felt as if there were a fire burning in her stomach. She thought, I've already given you my chastity. Can't you give in to me just this once? She felt deeply wronged. Now, as Li Xiumei watched Chen Feng tear into the drumstick in big bites, her stomach let out an extremely untimely growl. The sound was very loud, perfectly clear in the quiet room. Chen Feng paused his chopsticks and turned to look outside. Yo, is it snowing and thundering too? Hearing that, Li Xiumei was overcome with shame and anger, wishing she could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. She buried her head in her knees, tears pattering down. Wronged. Too wronged. Her body had been taken, and now she couldn't even get a mouthful of food. Life like this is impossible. Chen Feng paid her no mind at all and kept eating. The best way to deal with this kind of stupid little princess is to starve her for a few meals. Once she's so hungry she can't take it anymore, she'll naturally come crawling over and beg him. Simp? No such thing. I hunted this prey with my own skill, so why should I spoil you? Besides, Chen Feng was very curious. How could a little princess actually exist in this era? Could it be that this Li Xiumei was the founding grandmaster or something? Who? Chen Feng ate and drank his fill, then let out a loud belch. Comfortable. After transmigrating here, he had finally had a full meal after these 2 days. Lu Lan briskly cleared the bowls and chopsticks, but when she picked up Chen Feng's bowl, she froze. There was still nearly half a bowl left unfinished. This is... Lu Lan quickly carried it away and went to the outer room to wash up. Full and sleepy, Xiao Ling collapsed on the Kong and fell fast asleep. Outside, the sky had gone completely dark. In winter, night falls especially early. They finished dinner a little after 4 in the afternoon, and before 5 it was already pitch black outside. The temperature in the room began to drop. The fire in the stove gradually died down, and cold air seeped in through the cracks in the window. Chen Feng took off his shoes and sat cross-legged on the Kong, feeling the warmth beneath him. He turned his head and looked toward the other end of the Kong. Li Xiumei was still curled up there. She hadn't eaten, so she had no heat in her body, and now she was shivering from the cold. Her thin, coarse cloth clothes couldn't block out the chill at all, and her whole body was curled into a ball, her shoulders jerking slightly, clearly still crying. Chen Feng lay at the head of the Kong, where it was the most comfortable. He was full, warm, and cozy now, but only for the moment. Midnight would be even colder. He needed something to warm himself. He tilted his head and looked beside him. Li Xiumei was curled up in the middle of the Kong, a full half-meter away from him. The coarse cloth garment on her body couldn't block out the nighttime chill at all. Her whole body was curled into a ball, her shoulders twitching as she shivered from the cold. The worst part was her stomach. Gurgle, gurgle. In the quiet room, the sound was especially loud. Chen Feng snickered. What? Are you raising frogs in that stomach of yours? They sure are croaking happily. With her back to him, Li Xiumei trembled with anger. Get lost. She squeezed out through clenched teeth. After saying that, Li Xiumei shifted farther inward, pressing her back directly against the sleeping Li Xiaoling. Any farther in, and there was Lu Lan. Chen Feng had no intention of indulging her. He stretched out his long arm, directly crossing that half-meter distance, and grabbed Li Xiumei by the arm. You, what are you trying to do? Li Xiumei cried out in alarm. Chen Feng twisted his wrist and hauled her whole body over in one go. Li Xiumei was so hungry that her limbs were weak, and she had no strength to resist at all. She only felt the world spin, and then her whole body crashed into a broad, scorching hot chest. The man's body heat came through the fabric, making her skin tighten from the heat. Let go of me. Li Xiumei braced both hands against Chen Feng's chest and pushed outward with all her might. With your little bit of strength, you're not even enough to scratch my itch. Chen Feng didn't let go. He took the opportunity to draw his arms in, firmly imprisoning her in his embrace. His large hand wrapped directly around her slender waist. So thin. Women in this era had so little oil and fat in their diets that there wasn't an ounce of extra flesh on their waists. But where there should be curves, there was no skimping at all. Chen Feng's palm rested against her lower back. Even through the coarse cloth clothing, he could feel her figure, very thin. Li Xiumei panicked. She twisted her body, trying to break free. You beast. Don't touch me. She cursed in a lowered voice, afraid of waking her sister-in-law and niece beside them. Not only did Chen Feng not loosen his grip, he was actually very well behaved, absolutely not messing around or groping. It's only natural for me to touch my own woman. Who's your woman? Have you no shame? Li Xiumei snapped in exasperation. What? After you've slept with me, you still want to be some other man's woman? You. Li Xiumei was momentarily speechless. That's right. Do I even have a choice? I'm no longer an untouched maiden. Humiliation. Utter humiliation. She opened her mouth, wanting to bite Chen Feng's shoulder. Quick-eyed and quick-handed, Chen Feng grabbed her chin in one go. Born in the year of the dog? You still want to bite people? Eating my food, living under my roof. What's wrong with having you warm my bed? I didn't eat your food, Li Xiumei said angrily. Then your sister-in-law and your niece aren't human? Chen Feng's logic was flawless. If you keep moving around, I'll do you right now. I'm idle anyway. These words were extremely lethal. Li Xiumei's body instantly went rigid, not daring to move even the slightest bit anymore. She knew all too well how much of a bastard this man was. There was nothing he wouldn't do. Chen Feng smiled in satisfaction. That's more like it. Lie still and behave. I'm warm, you won't freeze. He adjusted into a comfortable position and pulled most of Li Xiumei's body into his arms. Li Xiumei was forced to press against him. The man's scent enveloped her from all sides. She closed her eyes and let out a faint whimper. Warm liquid slid from the corners of her eyes, rubbing onto Chen Feng's single-layer jacket. Chen Feng pretended not to see it, even though he hated women crying the most. But being this quiet didn't get in the way and could even help him sleep. His hand rested on Li Xuemei, absent-mindedly squeezing her shoulder and nothing else, with a sleeping Li Shaoling between them. And Lu Lan hadn't fallen asleep at all. With her back to the outside, she was curled up under the quilt, both hands gripping the corner tightly. The wooden Kong transmitted sound extremely well. She could hear Chen Feng and Li Xuemei's struggling, conversation, and even the rustling sound of fabric rubbing, all with perfect clarity. Lu Lan's heart was pounding hard. She was a widow. Her man had been dead for 3 years. In those 3 years, she had raised the child alone and also had to look after her sister-in-law. Every day when she opened her eyes, it was all about how to get food and how to survive. She had long forgotten what a man felt like. But now, on the same Kong, less than a meter away, a young and vigorous man was bullying her sister-in-law. Listening to Li Xuemei's suppressed sobs, Lu Lan felt a wave of bitterness in her heart. Xuemei has suffered. It's all for this family. But she didn't dare speak up to stop it. The pheasant Chen Feng brought back today completely shattered her bottom line. In this winter where people could starve to death, a man who could get meat was heaven. She didn't dare offend Chen Feng. She was afraid that if Chen Feng flew into a rage and drove the 3 of them out, what then? It was more than 30 degrees below zero outside. Going out meant death. Lu Lan gritted her teeth and forced herself to close her eyes. She felt ashamed. How could she? This hooligan, really, such a rascal. Lu Lan quickly shook her head, trying to throw out these messy thoughts. The next morning, dawn was just breaking. The wind outside had stopped, and the snow had stopped too. Chen Feng opened his eyes right on time. His body clock made him wake up at this hour every day. He lowered his head and glanced at the person in his arms. Li Xuemei was sleeping soundly, her whole body wrapped around him like an octopus. Her cheek was pressed against his chest, her sleeping face serene, nothing like last night's clawing and flailing. Chen Feng let out a sigh. Sigh. My poor brother really has suffered. I need to find a house. He pulled his thoughts back, got out of bed as quietly as possible, and walked to the corner to pick up the hunting bow he had snatched yesterday. He slung the quiver over his shoulder and took the only remaining corn bun. This was his rations for going up the mountain. Chen Feng pushed open the door and strode into the wind and snow. No sooner had Chen Feng left than the wooden door inside creaked shut tightly. Lu Lan hurriedly got out of bed and put on her shoes. She went to the outer room and reheated the half bowl of meat soup left from last night on the stove. Chen Feng had deliberately left this behind, and Lu Lan knew it very well. How big was that hoodlum's appetite? He could chew up and swallow a whole pheasant, bones and all. Yet he had deliberately left a few bits of meat at the bottom of the bowl. This man cursed harshly, but in his heart he still cared about Xuemei. That gave Lu Lan hope. Carrying the steaming earthenware bowl, Lu Lan walked into the inner room. Li Xuemei was still curled up under the covers, her whole body drawn into a ball. The rumbling of her stomach could be heard even through the quilt. Xuemei, get up and have some hot soup. Lu Lan set the clay bowl on the Kong table. The smell of meat rose with the steam and went straight into one's nostrils. Li Xuemei said nothing. I'm not eating his food. You silly girl, who are you sulking with? Lu Lan reached out to tug at the quilt. Do you think this soup blew in on the wind? Fengzi deliberately saved this for you last night. Sitting on the Kong, she continued, didn't you see his appetite? He could chew up and swallow a whole pheasant, bones and all. Yet he still left the thickest piece of chicken skin and a few bits of meat at the bottom of the bowl. That shows he's still thinking of you. Thinking of me. Li Xuemei snorted under the covers. Humph. He's a beast. Didn't you hear how he bullied me last night? Lu Lan sighed. Sigh. I heard it, but so what? In times like these, can pride fill your stomach? Look at Xiaoling. She ate meat yesterday, and today there's already color in her little face. Looking at her daughter's complexion, her heart ached. Then look at yourself. You've starved to the point you don't even have the strength to get out of bed. Are you really planning to starve yourself to death on this Kong? Li Xuemei kept her lips tightly sealed and said nothing. Sister-in-law is going to tell you something from the bottom of my heart. Lu Lan paused, then continued. Fengzi may be a bastard, but he can get meat. In this Kaoshan village, any man who can put meat on the table for the 3 of us mother and daughters is heaven itself. You've already given your body to him. So who are you putting on this act of purity for now? If you starve to death, he can turn around and find some untouched young girl to warm his bed. Tell me, won't you be the one at a loss? Lu Lan lowered her voice and moved a little closer. Look at him. His mouth is merciless, but to the 3 of us, he's better than those rotten men outside by who knows how much, and he's responsible. Just look at him. He went out early this morning, probably up the mountain to hunt. Lu Lan spoke earnestly and sincerely. If we stay with him, The three of us won't starve to death. Li Xuemei suddenly threw off the quilt, her eyes red-rimmed. Sister-in-law, how can you speak for him? I'm only doing it for your own good. Don't let yourself lose your body for nothing. Lu Lan brought the clay bowl in front of her, her eyes red. Xuemei, from now on, if Chen Feng bullies you, I, as your sister-in-law, will shield you from it. Sister-in-law? Li Xuemei's tears pattered down. No, you absolutely mustn't. I won't let that bastard bully you. Then, hurry and drink it while it's hot. Lu Lan wiped her tears, feeling sorry for her little sister-in-law. Li Xuemei stared at the bowl of meat soup, her stomach twisting violently. Hungry. Too hungry. Li Xuemei swallowed. Drink it. Lu Lan stuffed the wooden spoon into her hand. Li Xuemei finally couldn't hold back anymore. She picked up the earthenware bowl and gulped it down mouthful after mouthful. The warm meat soup flowed down her throat into her stomach. Comfortable. So comfortable. Tears plopped into the bowl. She cried as she licked the bits of meat from the bottom of the bowl clean. Not even a drop of grease was left. Though it wasn't much, her body warmed up quite a bit. Li Xuemei set down the earthenware bowl. She hated Chen Feng, but she hated her own useless self even more. A single bowl of meat soup had bought her over. Lu Lan looked at her like this and sighed inwardly. Women, just accept your fate. In the mountains. The air in the mountains was cold, and even breathing it into his lungs carried the taste of icy shards. Chen Feng casually pulled out that slightly warm corn bun from his pocket. This thing was already a little cracked and dry. Chewing it felt no different from gnawing on wood chips, but he swallowed with effort. As he chewed, he wandered through the snowy forest. This patch of woods was quite dense, with pines and birches crowded together, their branches laden with heavy snow. Chen Feng stopped and crouched beneath an old pine tree. There was a very distinctive string of footprints in the snow. 2 big round dots in front, 2 small round dots behind. Rabbit tracks. Chen Feng followed the tracks with his gaze and saw that the trail stretched all the way behind a thicket. There was a burrow nearby. Unfortunately, he only had a bow and arrows with him and hadn't brought any wire snares. Rabbits are nocturnal animals, so the chances of catching one in the daytime were extremely low. Forget it. He'd memorize this route for now and bring some wire next time to set a live snare. Chen Feng stood up, brushed the snow off his pant legs, and continued deeper into the woods. After walking for a little over half an hour, he stopped on a sheltered slope. The snow here had been scratched away, exposing some withered yellow grass roots. Chen Feng slowed his breathing and kept his body very low. Up ahead in the bushes was a hen pheasant. From the looks of it, it should be 3 or 4 jin. It was lowering its head, scratching hard in the snow for food, its steps unsteady. Less than 1 jin, still meat. Chen Feng slowly drew an arrow from behind him and pulled the bow directly. Whoosh! With a muffled thud, the arrowhead sank straight into the base of the hen pheasant's neck. The pheasant didn't even have time to cry out before it flapped its wings twice and toppled into the snow. Chen Feng quickly ran over and grabbed the still twitching pheasant. He skillfully wrung its neck, then started processing it. As Chen Feng walked down the mountain, both hands flying, plucking feathers. Grayish-brown feathers danced all over the sky, falling onto the pure white snow, creating an oddly eerie kind of beauty. He walked fast, and before long he had plucked the pheasant clean bare. Then he pulled out the small knife he carried and deftly slit it open. He wanted all the innards, except the feces and urine. As for the chicken butt, Shaoling liked that part best. Chen Feng weighed the dressed bird in his hand, feeling delighted. If he took this to the black market, he could at least trade it for a few yuan or a pile of coarse grain. But he had no plans to sell it. First, the trip back and forth was far, and the risk was too great. Chen Feng tucked the chicken away, then casually gathered some firewood to take back. Having enough for one night would be good enough. Because there wasn't much firewood to gather either, people had already picked it over. Luckily on the way, he picked up a hazel grouse, stiff as a board. A little past 3 in the afternoon. When he was almost at the entrance to the village, Chen Feng passed by a household. The courtyard wall was built of adobe bricks, with thick straw mats laid over the top. A burst of crisp sound came from the yard. Smack. Then came a child's cheer. Hit. I hit that tree fork. Chen Feng stopped and peered inside through the crack in the door. A 7 or 8-year-old little boy was holding a slingshot made from a wooden fork, aiming at the sparrows in the tree. The slingshot's rubber band had been cut from an old tire and looked extremely springy. A thought flashed through Chen Feng's mind. Although bows and arrows were powerful, they weren't as nimble as a slingshot. It could be used to go after small animals. Kid, playing with a slingshot? Chen Feng pushed open the half-closed courtyard gate and swaggered in. The child was startled, and when he saw it was Chen Feng, the smile on his face vanished instantly. Chen, Madman Chen, what are you here for? In East Village, Chen Feng's reputation was notoriously bad. Children were more afraid of seeing him than seeing a wolf. Chen Feng crouched down, trying to make himself look as kind as possible, though to the child that smile looked more like ill intent. Don't be afraid. I just saw that your slingshot is pretty well made and wanted to exchange some technical know-how with you. The child clutched the slingshot tightly and took 2 steps back. My mom said I'm not allowed to talk to you. Hey, kid, watch how you talk. Chen Feng didn't get angry either. He took out the hazel grouse he had picked up and waved it in front of the child. See this? What is it? The child's eyes instantly went wide, and his throat bobbed unconsciously. Hazel. Hazel grouse?